I think all films are impure these days, and the idea of purity is something that freaks me out. I think today naturally we mix so many things. You might write a scene thinking about Tarkovsky, but also in the same scene you might remember a wonderful commercial from 1979 that you saw on YouTube, or that you remember from your childhood. My name is Kleber Mendonça Filho. I wrote and directed The Secret Agent, and I've been invited to the film festival in Cologne to do some kind of masterclass and also to pick up an award given by the Hollywood Reporter. I have a new film. I've been traveling with the film. The film has been, I can say now that it's been well received. And I think an award like this helps put a spotlight on the film and on the work that I have been doing. So I feel very gracious. I feel very grateful for the recognition. And I also believe that this kind of recognition, I also see it as a recognition for what the film has done over the last 5 months since it premiered in Cannes. It should be said that we are part of this thing called the award season. And the award season happens, some of it happens in Europe, and a lot of it happens in the US. And something from the Hollywood Reporter, I think it does help in some way to bring some kind of recognition for the film itself. The Secret Agent is a thriller set in Brazil in 1977. And it's very much about someone who, at a very difficult time, political time, in Brazil in the 70s, someone who did everything right, and that's Wagner Moura's character. And because the system was twisted and upside down, he paid a price for being so correct, honest, and right. And that often happens in political situations which flirt with autocracy and the complete absence of democracy. It's a thriller. It's a very exciting film from what I have observed with audiences and from critical reaction. And it's also a very emotional film. It's super Brazilian, but also universal. And I'm happy with the way it's been traveling and translating into other languages. I think the spark was the desire to do a classic genre exercise, a thriller, something that would come from different films and cinemas that helped me become the filmmaker I am, or even the film critic that I used to be. But at the same time making a Brazilian film out of different parts, out of parts from Brazilian cinema, Australian cinema, French cinema, and I think above all US cinema from the 1970s. The other thing that I really wanted to do, and this is something that I did achieve, I wanted to work with Wagner Moura, the actor, my main actor in the film. And instead of trying to fit him into scripts that I might have written, I thought that I should sit down and write the script specifically for him. It's tailor-made for him. The other thing is, I'm really into the idea. I think every time you make a film, you build a world and you build a sense of reality with the story, with the camera, with the art direction, with the actors and the costumes and everything else and the photography. So I was really interested in building this historic atmosphere, looking back 50 years. 50 years ago, I was a child, and I have memories of the 70s, which are very early memories. And that really helped me sit down and write the script, because that's where I brought the heart into the story. I'm also interested in developing some exercise that would take place way back into the past, at a time when I did not exist. I wasn't born. But this film has some personal background that comes from childhood, and to reconnect personal memories with history and research is something that I found very exciting. And I think that's basically, in a nutshell, that's what really brought me to this project. And I'm happy I got to make it. I think any film you make is a challenge. Making a period piece is probably a bigger challenge. But the truth is, I've been photographing, shooting on video, shooting on Super 8, making other films in my hometown since the 80s, since I was a teenager. So I know the city, I know its secrets, I know where to put the camera, I think. It almost feels like I've been doing research for this film for the last 35 years. So it's not like I came to Cologne and I have to spend, a couple of months just visiting locations every day, and morning and afternoon, and to get a sense of, to get a visual sense of the city, and to get a consultant and talk to the consultant about the history of the city. And I have been part of the history of my city, so in one way, yeah, it really feels like I already had my favorite shots, and then I also wrote the script thinking about these angles and these setups and the way how to shoot a certain street or the downtown area. This is a completely fair question, and it makes complete sense, but I think it really comes from the writing process, and it's not something that I planned. I was writing the script, and so many ideas came to me, and these ideas finally became layers of the story. And somebody in London described the film as an onion that you keep taking layers out, and each new layer reveals a new layer. But this is not something that I planned. I never said my next film will be multi-layered. This is something that comes from the story itself, and it takes place in 1977. There is a menacing atmosphere, but at the same time, it takes place during Carnival, which is a joyful, beautiful, intoxicating atmosphere in the best possible way, full of color and sound, and then we have more than 50 characters, and we have a cat with two heads, and then there is the fairy tale-like horror story of the hairy leg. So there are many ideas that I never thought they would be out of place in the film. I just found a way of making it work, and I like the result. It's quite dense, and there's a lot of information, and hopefully, the thriller set in the 1970s doesn't even begin to describe the film. It seems to do its own thing depending on where you are. in the US, I've had strong reactions about what's taking place politically in the US right now. I was in Mexico this week, where we had truly amazing reactions to the film, and it somehow the fact that we come from the Americas, Latin America, it seemed to bring the film closer to Latin America. In Spain, we had really interesting, fascinating reactions related to the Franco years and to the way that Spain hasn't quite faced the facts about its recent history. And I'm very curious to see what happens in Brazil, because the film will open in Brazil same day as Germany and Portugal, November 6th. And I'm very curious to see what happens in Brazil. Never deliberately. I only came to realize that, well, I wanted to write a film about the 70s. But then, ironically, many of the terrible ideas from the 1970s, they were brought back by the former president, who is going to jail now. And then I realized that I was writing from contemporary Brazil, which was going through a fetishistic, nostalgic reconstruction of some of the worst ideas from the dictatorship being brought back during, a time of democracy, which makes it even crazier. So I think the film says a lot about the last 10 years, even if it was written to be set 50 years ago. I'm not sure I would call them homages, because they come in without ever knocking on the door. We are what we eat, and we remember the books we read and the music we like and the films we love. And I think when I write the script, it is true that I remember very, very organically, without forcing myself. I remember films, I remember scenes and images from other films. And it happens on a conscious level and in a subconscious level. Sometimes I sit down to watch The Secret Agent and I realize something that I had never realized before, that some other film brought me to this scene in a way. So it's not an homage. I think an homage would be taking down the titles of films and saying, I have to do an homage to this one, tick, and it doesn't really work like that. Sometimes I do remember a specific film, but sometimes I only realize much later. And I also believe that it's a beautiful thing to do what I call impure films. I think all films are impure these days, and the idea of purity is something that freaks me out. I think today naturally we mix so many things. You might write a scene thinking about Tarkovsky, but also in the same scene you might remember a wonderful commercial from 1979 that you saw on YouTube, or that you remember from your childhood. Local television commercial, but which is really well done, and it has a nice piece of music, and then there it is, next to Tarkovsky in your own imagination, in your own memories. I don't think mathematically the fact that I was a film critic should instruct me on the way in the way I make films. But it is true that 13 years writing about film and seeing films every day gave me some kind of almost like a physical training. And I'm probably talking about the brain, about trying to understand what culture is trying to give us, and what films are trying to say. And the great thing about being a film critic was seeing all the films I never in my right mind would see, because some films I just don't want to see. And it was just part of the job. These days I only see the films I want to see. But the film critic, because he or she is paid and it's a job, and you're exposed to things you wouldn't normally see, and then I actually missed that because I made many discoveries, films that my own prejudice, my own personal lack of interest in a certain film or title, I had to see it, and then I finally said, that was really good. It's so good that I came to see it. And I missed that part. But I'm not sure how to explain the chemical reaction of a film critic applying his or her experience or knowledge to making films. I'm not sure that. It's like saying, your experience as a librarian, did it help you in making better films, or writing books? I'm sure it can impact, because if you work in a library, you might have the time to read, and by reading, you might have the desire to write. And by being surrounded by books, you might have the desire to write. But it's not mathematical, I think. Well, I think it begins with Bacurau. I met Udo in Palm Springs, where he lives. And we were about to begin production, or about to begin casting that film, 1 year from shooting. And I immediately thought of him for Michael, one of the important characters in Bacurau. He came to Brazil, we shot the film. It was a fantastic human, professional experience. I like him very much. I love Udo. And then, of course, I wrote the secret agent for Wagner, but there are other roles in the film that I just could not help but thinking of two actors. One is Tânia Maria, who plays Sebastiana in the film. I really believe that Sebastiana came from Tânia, whom I had met in Bacurau. And Sebastiana would not exist without Tânia, and vice versa. And the other one was Udo. When I wrote the German tailor, of course I was thinking about him. But when I was a kid, I was introduced to a Romanian tailor in Recife, which has a strong Jewish community. And then I never forgot that very special real-life character. So when I wrote the script, I made him German. And I thought that it would be amazing if Udo played, Hans, the German tailor. And it's a very strong character in a really strange and interesting scene. Well, it's classic co-production story. We were co-producing the film with MK2 from Paris. And we needed more partners. And through MK2, we worked with Lemming Films from Holland and then 1-2 Films from Germany. And it's been a great partnership, not only with 1-2 Films, Fred and Saul, but also with Lemming in Holland and MK2 in France. So it's a Brazilian-Dutch French-German co-production. And I still got to work on post-production in Berlin, in Potsdam. And Berlin is a city that I absolutely love. And I got to spend, I think, a month in 2 different sections, staying in Berlin and going to Potsdam every day. And working with Dirk Meyer, who happens to be a great colorist and who has worked with a great number of filmmakers, and Alice Horvacher, Karin Aynuz, and he did an amazing job on The Secret Agent. Not so different from what I expect from all audiences. I think the best films, they take you and they give you a ride which is full of surprises and mystery, and it's almost like you're sinking into a reality that I hope it will be found interesting and engrossing and exciting and moving and fascinating. Because it's very much about history, but being about history, it's also about the world today. And I also think it has a number of characters which are of note. That's a very good question. I think sharing images is almost like you're sharing a photo album with a friend who comes to your house. I often think that cinema is like that, but on a different scale. I prepare an album, a collection of pictures that may come with sound, and I get to share these pictures, and then hopefully they will be of interest. Every time I begin a new project, I ask myself, will this be of interest? Will anybody care? Will anybody find this interesting? And so far I've been making these films, and so far they have found, some good. They have been welcomed, I would say. But it's really about sharing a point of view and sharing images and sounds. That's what keeps me going. I also cannot help but think that each film is a piece of is a new file for the archives, and hopefully it will be kept and for the future and mean something to someone.